Hey everyone, today we have Reza Khadjavi, co-founder and CEO of Motion. Now, Motion is a platform that provides creative reporting for performance marketing teams. What's interesting is Reza founded Shoelace as a tech company originally before switching their business model to an agency, and now he's going back to founding another tech company. Confused? No worries, we're going to dive in and learn more. That said, Reza, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shane. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you here. I'm super excited about your journey, man. But let's start at the beginning. How did it all begin?
Yeah, so in 2014, myself and my two co-founders, we were working at a startup in Toronto. That's where the three of us met. The startup was in the e-commerce space. It was like a SaaS company, and the three of us worked there for about a year together. And we knew that we wanted to start our own company at some point. We didn't know what we wanted to do. We didn't have a particular idea, but just that the three of us, we felt had the right ingredients for a founding team. And by the summer of 2015, quit our jobs and decided to spend the summer just like hacking away on stuff, ideating to see if we could come up with an idea, get into an accelerator by the end of the summer. And if not, basically go back into to getting a job. And so we had a strict deadline there. Our CTO Alex was his visa was expiring or something, so he actually had a deadline that he would be leaving Toronto to go back to South Africa by a certain date. So the pressure was really on. We had a goal to start something, get into an accelerator. If not, party's over, everybody goes back to get a job. And thankfully it worked out, and we applied to a few accelerators, didn't get into most of them, ended up getting into one called Boomtown in Colorado. So then we drove, I should tell you what we were working on. So yeah. Shoelace was the company that we started there. And we were really just talking to e-commerce store owners, asking them about their problems, things like that. And it was a pretty interesting moment in time where Shopify their app store was kind of just getting off the ground. Shopify had been around for years by that point, but they were still their hockey stick growth had still not happened yet. Funny enough, at that time, I remember talking to some investors. I'm jumping all over the place, but I spoke to an investor at that time, and they were like, "Oh, Shopify, that's played out. Their apps saturated now. Yeah. You should have been there early. Now it's just it's too much." And it couldn't have been more wrong. At that time, Shopify had 100,000 merchants, I think, something like that, 80,000 merchants on their platform. And their app store was just taking off. And there couldn't have been a better time to try to hack on an idea than the summer of 2015 in the Shopify app store, right? That was a really good time to be doing that. We ended up finding a problem around the connection between Facebook and Shopify. So the other interesting timing of it too was that Facebook had just sunsetted their audience exchange program, and they were rolling out their own pixel. They were rolling out their own custom audiences. And that was a moment where pretty much every single Shopify store owner needed to connect their shop with their Facebook pixel and their catalog with their Facebook catalog. And so Shoelace in the early days was a app that connected Facebook and Shopify together. And so it really took off because every single merchant needed one of those. And we were the most popular app in the app store for that. And so early on, like I mentioned, we got into an accelerator in Boulder, Colorado. We drove from Toronto to Boulder, just a nice drive. Yeah. In the middle of it is all pretty boring, but once you get to Colorado, it starts to look nice. Lots of nice mountains and scenery there. And so we did the accelerator and came back. And anyway, there's a lot more that happens from there, but that's sort of how we got our start.
Gotcha. So hold on. That's very unique. Quitting your job before you even have an MVP, before you have any kind of anything proven out. That's literally what you guys did. Just quit and then started working on it.
I don't recommend it. Our third co-founder was very nervous about this. We still kind of tease him about it. He was very, very nervous, did not want to do it.
Yeah.
But me and Alex were a little bit more confident, mainly because I had learned how to code recently prior to this. So that job was the first job I ever had. Prior to that, I had started another company with my brother. It was a laundry delivery business. And so actually I'd never had a job prior to that, but through working on that first business, I learned how to code. And when I got this job, it was my first real job, and I was a developer. And after I spent a year there, I felt like I was employable for the first time in my life. And that gave me some insurance policy with like, if I know how to code, probably I'll get another job again. And so like worst case, it's a summer gone, and I'll be able to get another job again after that. But so that was like kind of my insurance policy. And I had also just gotten married, and I knew that like, if I don't take risks now, the older I get, the more risk averse I'd be. And so I wanted to just kind of fast forward a little bit of risk up front and condense it into a summer. If it doesn't work, okay, go back to get a job. And so I knew that like there is an inverse relation to like age and risk tolerance. And like, I knew that was happening. So I wanted to take some risk up front, but don't recommend it in general, because usually those don't work out. The bet that we were making was that we thought we were a really strong team. So like, you have this like classic cliche, right? That like ideas are not worth anything. It's the execution that's everything. And because we worked so closely at this last company, we built like a pretty strong bond between the three of us. We felt like between me and Alex, we like code anything. And between me, Alex, and David, we were like, had the right kind of energy to brainstorm and get to the bottom of different like challenges and ideas. And so we just felt like the energy was right on the team to like take a shot at that. So yeah, I'd say the only time it makes sense to take a risk like that is if the team that's there feels so strongly about it that that kind of outweighs all the risk of not being able to make something work. And if you have something to fall back on, it's not so bad if you condense it.
Right. Fair enough. No, that's a good point. But then, of course it worked out, and it worked out really well. But how did you identify that opportunity between Shopify and Facebook? Was that something you were exposed to at the previous company, or talk to me about that?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer of just like talking to customers and understanding their problems, and like trying to validate things with writing as few lines of code as possible. So even though Alex and I were both developers and we could build stuff, we made sure to not build anything until we had like some direction of where we wanted to go. So literally what we did was we opened up Yelp, and we were just like sending cold emails to business owners. At the time, we were reaching out to just like service businesses. I think we had an idea around service businesses. So we're reaching out to, I think it was maid service companies at that time. Like we had some idea around like, I think it was around like the online scheduling for a maid service company, or I don't know, something like that. And we just wanted to understand their problems. And a lot of this is just like putting yourself out there, talking to customers, and then one thing leads to another. In our case, I'll never forget this. It was this Russian guy. He was an owner of a maid service company. And so we were talking to him about his business, asking him about his problems, things like that. And then he also randomly told us that he also has an online store where he sold the most random of things. He was selling Fabergé eggs. And it was very, very random. And we asked him about that. And he wasn't even on Shopify. He was on this other platform. Can't remember their name. I don't even know if they're still around. But he was on this other platform. And he was the one that was actually, like, every time we asked him about his maid service, he kept talking to us about his e-commerce store, because he sensed that we're like young and tech savvy and like we understand things. And he had all kinds of like technical issues with running his online shop. And so he kept driving the conversation towards his online store. And I think what he was trying to do was set up his Facebook pixel. I think that was his challenge. Like, I heard about this Facebook thing. I'm trying to set up my pixel. I have to go to my theme file of my shop, and it's complicated. Can you guys help me with that? Like, I think that's where the idea came from, was through this gentleman. And obviously we were from Canada. We knew Shopify, and so like that, trying to figure out what to do for his store stumbled us into like Shopify and Shopify's ecosystem. And so that's how it came to be. But a lot of the early parts was just talking to customers. And I think what we would do is like, we would have this idea, for concept, we'd whip up a landing page for it. So like this fake company with like a random logo and like just kind of some messaging around what like the product did. Like there's no product, doesn't exist, but like something like that. Shoot an email to the business owner. Hey, we're early stage founders working on something. Here's a link to like our idea. What do you think? Could we talk to you and get your feedback on what we're working on? And it turns out like when you ask people for feedback, they usually like to do it. Like when looking for advice, looking for feedback, people generally don't mind doing that. And so that was our like initial strategy to be able to get people to talk to us. We don't have a product or anything, but at least if we could talk to people, see if they'd respond to our email, see if like that problem resonated with them in any way. And the idea was those same people would be our beta customers. If we did actually end up solving their problem, then we already had that connection to go back to them and say, okay, if we build something around this, like, will you agree to use it? So that tends to be a pretty good strategy. The worst strategy is to like lock yourself up in a room, dream up like brilliant ideas with your co-founder, don't talk to anybody, and hack away at that for 12 months only before getting like fed up and shutting the whole thing down without ever talking to anyone. Like that happens quite often. And like to fight that, you want to get in front of customers as quickly as possible for sure.
Yeah, I love it. Anytime I've spoken to a founder that's had a successful company, they seem to say the same thing, like do that customer discovery, speak to as many people as possible, run your ideas by them. You'll find that maybe whatever your idea was not really hitting the mark, but you'll discover something else and you'll start picking up on those trends and build your product around that. So no, I think that's some great advice, man. Cool. So let's switch gears now. You went to Colorado, beautiful drive, accelerator happened, what's next? What happened with Shoelace next? How did you get your first, few customers, and what was that journey like?
Yeah, so we were very lucky, very, very lucky building on the Shopify App Store. Like the timing could not have been better. So, it's this known thing that like getting your first customers and in general, just distribution is the most challenging part of startups. And for us, it was just like distribution poured from the skies. Like if you build something in the Shopify App Store that was like solving a problem, the discoverability there and just like customer acquisition was so easy. So I don't think we did much in order to like acquire our first set of customers other than just like launch the app on the App Store. And then it was just about like, there was a lot of rich communities around Shopify that were starting to form, Facebook groups, things like that. And so I think our first few customers were really just from launching the app, and people would go browse the App Store, click install, and like that was the main source of customers. And then because there was these like groups and communities that were forming of Shopify stores, they would all talk to each other and say, what are you using and whatnot. And so like we learned about those groups because we'd be mentioned in them here and there, and like, oh, there's like this group with 50,000 store owners in there. And every time we had like a product feature added, we might like post in that group and say like, hey, we have an update, that sort of thing. So that was our go-to-market strategy. And it was way easier than normal. Like in a typical path, you'd really have to like hunt and work very, very hard for your customers. But sometimes timing is right. You're in the right kind of platform, App Store that really just like the wind is on your side and carries you forward. That was 2016, 17 for Shoelace was like that. But then 2018, the winds were hitting us in the face at that point. And, this kind of easy ride doesn't last forever if you're not building like solving a really deep problem, which we weren't at the time. Like what Shoelace was in its early days, a very simple kind of plugin for the Shopify App Store that was valuable. Every single merchant needed it, but it wasn't something that was going to create a ton of value over time. So we knew that what we were solving with the early version of the product wasn't something that was solving a deep problem. And so it was really just a matter of time before there were more like native integrations between Shopify and Facebook, where that initial problem that we were solving wasn't as valuable anymore, just because it became easier to do. And by 2018, that started to happen. And it was just not a problem that was going to be able to like take us to the next level of growth. And so by 2018, the company starts to kind of have some headwind and some challenges around where do we go from there. And so we spent 2018 and 2019 working on like a pivot of what Shoelace can become. And I'm actually still very excited about what we tried to do there. A lot of people in the community were rooting for us on that. And it was like an exciting vision that just was like the timing was not there for it. And what that vision was because it became very easier for people to launch these kinds of retargeting campaigns through the Facebook pixel. Now what had happened was that retargeting had become super annoying for people. So you just get blasted with the same ad over and over again. You might go to a website once and then like you don't stop seeing the ad for 6 months afterwards. And that started to become really annoying. And so what we tried to do with Shoelace was to build a platform that allowed people to create customer journeys through their paid marketing campaigns. So basically, like depending on what you did on the site and how many days it's been since you've last visited and what kind of user profile are you, you'd be able to build this very comprehensive journey almost through paid advertising in a similar way that you would do with like email drip campaigns or email segmentation. We were like, why is this not possible to do with paid advertising across multiple channels? But obviously with like iOS 14 and like the move towards privacy and consolidation and a lot of these ad campaign structures, it was just, the vision was exciting. People would come to our webinars, they'd download our content. A lot of people wanted to see this come to life, but there was just not a market opportunity to build a SaaS business around this problem. And so the business was in a very challenging spot for 2018, 2019, where we would have all of these people, a lot of attention, a lot of people like excited about what we're doing. But on the back end, like to actually make the business model work, we were very much struggling because agencies and professional marketers didn't want to use the product that we were building, but they were intrigued by our ideas and they basically take those ideas and go and like implement them for their own clients. And then the brands that would come to us, they also were not very interested in using the product either. They just wanted someone to do it for them. And so what we started to do in 2018, 2019, as we tried to figure out, okay, what are we going to go from here, is we just started doing these campaigns, these like customer journey campaigns for the clients ourselves. And the goal was always like, you know, we're going to do this temporarily until we can automate it all, or until like the product can take over from there. But just like was not something that the market wanted from us. And one thing that's very interesting is usually in startups, the market will tell you what it wants to tell you, either that there's no idea here and you'll just see like cold silence, or the market will tell you that your initial idea is not what it wants, but it wants something else from you and will like pull you in that direction. And that's very much what happened with Shoelace. What the market wanted from us was to run these campaigns for people. Like people would come to Shoelace because they were excited about the vision of this customer journey approach to marketing. And they said, you guys seem to be the experts on this, and just like run this for me. I mean, great, all the stuff you're saying about your product, wonderful, but just run these campaigns for me. And so eventually we realized that like that's what the market wants from this business, and decided to just kind of embrace that and turn it into an agency business that is predicated on services to these clients, as opposed to, you know, something where there's going to be like a technology or a product necessarily that's going to drive that. And so by end of 2019, we made that decision. And by early 2020, we went all in on that, added more services. We hired a general manager for Shoelace to basically like help take it to the next level of growth. And it did really well. So in 2018, 2019, it was burning tons of cash. No investor wanted to give us any more money. And it was very clear that we needed to now like either shut the thing down or become profitable. And the most amazing thing that happened with the move to going and embracing services, that became wildly profitable. So now it started to make money instead of losing money, which was a very interesting experience for me. Up until that point, we were like losing money as a business because we were funded through kind of raising capital. And there was like this liberating moment where it's like, hang on a second, there's revenue here. And when we minus our expenses from our revenue, there's money left over after that. That's so weird. That's what businesses are, I guess. And so that was a fun time in early 2020, especially in the beginning of COVID. There was like this e-commerce boom. Everybody will remember that just kind of really, really took off. And so that was the moment where we decided to become an agency too. And so like, it was a really great year. It was a really great year. I personally knew that like, I was not the best person to be running a service business. That was not like, you know, where my heart was and not where my skill set was. Like, I love building stuff. I love kind of coming up with new ideas and working on product. And so what I did at that point was just started working on kind of new ideas and a new product, which has eventually become Motion. And we can talk about that, but that was kind of where Shoelace ended up and the journey to like listen to the market and understand what it wanted from us and obey the market is kind of the lesson there for sure.
Fair enough. Yeah, and that's nuts. That's a long journey too. That's like what, like 7 years? Kind of going through all of that, right?
About 6 years, yeah.
6 years. So during that rough time, that 2018, 2019, where you're either like, hey, like either we're shutting down, we're closing shop, or we're pivoting, but we don't know where to pivot to. We're like bleeding money, basically. So throughout that time period, what were some of the things that you learned that, you know, if you were to face that, experience that again, that you know what, I know how to handle this now?
So one thing is like, listen to your team, right? I was like lost and confused on like what I wanted to do. Like the team knew exactly what to do. Like for them, it was like, we're just doing retargeting. We're doing this stuff for these people. They're asking us for prospecting. They're asking us for other things. If we do that, we're just going to make more money. Why can't we just add prospecting? And I was crazy stubborn because I knew that like the moment we started doing prospecting, that's it. Like we're full on agency mode, because if we were just doing retargeting, it would have been easier to productize potentially. But like adding an additional service meant, you know, fully embracing like, okay, this is a service business now. But like the team all knew, everybody knew what needed to be done there. It was just a matter of like me getting to that realization. And so like, I think the big lesson there is the team, the people who are like closest to the customer, the closest to the problem, they know and understand things that you possibly couldn't if you're just kind of dreaming on a whiteboard on like, that's one of the most dangerous things of like something's not working and you're kind of in a pivot environment. What you start to think about is just like ideas, and you kind of lose that, you lose the potential to be kind of going back to the drawing board and talking to customers. And obviously some people handle it better. I think for a long period, I was spending a lot of time just like ideating in my own mind about like where it could be and where it could become. And by that point, you become way too disconnected from what's happening on the ground. And so either get into the ground and like go back to talking to customers again, or listen to the people who are, because they know where the challenges are and where the opportunities are. Because yeah, I can, especially once you like talk to investors and things like that, you get to this like point where the ideation of startups is like, what if we're this, or what if we're that, or what if we position it this way, or what if we go that way? And obviously you need that, but if it's not grounded in real conversations with real people on the ground, like you're basically like disconnected from reality and floating in a dark place.
Right. Fair enough. I think that's something that a lot of founders, might need to hear. Hey, you yourself could be the blocker to your own company's success. So
that was me. That was me. 2018, 2019. I think the whole company knew. It was like, should we tell him? Like, when is he gonna figure out that like this ain't working? And like they all knew. Like the team all knew, and it was just like. The thing is, like, if the founder is still excited and still has optimism, they still want to do something, like the team also wants to be supportive. Like they don't want to be the naysayers to be like, this is not going to work. And so they'll be optimistic, many of them, and try to be like, okay, well, maybe it can work. Maybe there's something here, but only to try to make you feel better. And so you really want to try to
Right.
understand what is on people's minds. And it's tough because there's so many challenges in startups, and you need a bit of delusion. You need a bit of like just
Mm-hmm.
blind optimism, because otherwise, like, a pessimist will never make a good startup founder.
Right.
There's no way.
Right.
There's so many reasons to be negative. But then the opposite problem is very dangerous, like overly optimistic, overly just kind of excited all the time. Like, no, if we like believe hard enough in the vision, it will work. Like, that's not good either. There needs to be grounded in reality with like insane amounts of optimism and grit to like go through challenging periods. But I think because founders are optimists by nature, they really do need to check themselves against reality somehow, either with people on the team or like making sure to never lose touch with customers is a big way to help that.
Yeah, that's huge. I think like the lesson that I'm taking there is like, yeah, whether like things are going good or things are going bad, like just you keep yourself grounded by speaking and listening to your customers, because they are the market. And the product market fit, like the market comes before the product always, right? So
yeah, I think founders have like Steve Jobs complex, right? Of like, oh, I'm a visionary, they won't get it, like, right, that sort of thing. And like the thing is like that's not even wrong. Like you sometimes, like, the market doesn't really know what it wants, but it knows what its problems are and knows what its challenges are. And so I think when people think of Steve Jobs, like he had a very good understanding of where the market was, and so his like visionariness was actually very well grounded. But like, you need to be very sure that you have that real understanding of what's going on to be able to apply your kind of unique visionary thinking, which is necessary also with startups. You have to deliver something. If all the problems are solved, then there is no opportunity. So you need problems, and you need some innovative thinking on how to solve them. But it can be very easy to dream up imaginary problems that sound very good, that you get excited about, and that's very dangerous.
Fair enough. So Reza, let's switch gears to Motion now. Let's talk about that. What problems are you solving with Motion?
Yeah, so I took a beating. 2018, 2019 was my delusional years of like losing touch with customers. Like, we started Shoelace with the right principles. We were talking to customers, we were grounded in reality, we did all the right things. But then by 2018, 2019, we got lost. Like we fell in love with the ideas too much, and we were just not listening to reality anymore. And like, that was painful. And I knew that had happened. And so obviously, when I was thinking about starting something again from scratch, it was very important to me to like correct that mistake and go back and do it properly again. And this time, with like 6 years of experience, also put me in a very different spot than in early on. I think one of the things that I realized when we were just starting out in 2015, 2016 is that because I was inexperienced, I think I was afraid of more ambitious problems. And so we ended up solving a very kind of simple, tiny problem. Because like, what do I know about organizations and like how teams work together? Like, I didn't have a lot of experience, but understanding like putting a pixel on a website, I get that. Oh, we can solve this problem. So my like understanding of the world and things like that was also very limited. And so my imagination was limited to like those areas. But after having gone through like raising money, growing a team, trying to collaborate across like different stakeholders, like I felt that if I talk to teams now, I can have a much better understanding of, okay, when someone describes a problem that is a complex problem that touches like multiple people and an organizational workflow, I can wrap my head around that problem, which was just as a matter of experience, like being a little bit older and having had a chance to work with teams and people. And so I knew that I was like ready for like talking to people about problems that were richer and deeper and like that really touched like the core of the business. Also just like understanding priorities. So basically it was like, go back to the drawing board of talking to customers like in the early days, but also realizing that if you're not solving people's most urgent, high priority problems, then you're not going to be able to build a very large company, because It's like, you know, if something is like a detail or an afterthought or something small, then you're just not going to be able to get a lot of attention from people. And just, it becomes very flaky. And so I knew that I wanted to solve an important problem, something that was high priority for people, something that was not in my imagination. So it was real and it was high priority and it was like a deep problem. That was kind of the conditions that I was looking for. And because we had built up a really good network of agencies, marketers, brands, like we had built a really strong network with Shoelace on the problem that we wanted to solve. Like there really was a lot of people that wanted to see that come to life. And so we were able to strike up conversations with a lot of really great teams on, hey, thinking about starting something new, would love to talk to you about it and learn about your problems. And so in those early conversations, we were pretty clear to not even have an idea. It was just talking to people. What are your challenges? What are your problems? Dig deeper, try to get to like a nucleus of a problem that was felt across a lot of teams. We knew that we knew who we wanted to solve for. We wanted to solve for like the marketers and the growth teams in like direct to consumer DTC. And so we started talking to them, and what we started to hear was the word creative just came up every single time in all of these conversations. And that was like the first fork in the road where we said, we're going to solve something around creative as a problem space. And the reason why that was really on top of everybody's minds was like, iOS 14 had just happened. And so like iOS 14 was when Apple launched a new update, and that kind of nuked Facebook's targeting capabilities in many ways. And so a lot of people were looking to up their creative strategy as a response to that, because if you lose a lot of targeting options, then creative becomes a really big part of how you can optimize. But even beyond that, just like timing thing of iOS 14, because these platforms have matured and there's so many advertisers on them and there's so many people that are like creating content for these platforms, you have feeds that are very crowded and very cluttered with a high quantity of content and also a high quality of content, where the best brands are like putting real effort into creating good content, even if it's just shot on an iPhone. Like it's a lot of it is like high quality, well thought out stuff. And so the bar for good creative has just gone up. And so what teams have realized is that people either were at the stage where they realized that I'm not making enough content. I really need to be able to find a way to create more creative. And that's like the early stage of the problem. There's actually a few companies that are solving this and helping companies create more content, which is very important. But once they have like a rhythm of, okay, I now have a few content creators, or I'm an in-house creative team, and we know how to create content now on like a week-to-week basis, and we don't have an issue there. Now our challenge is like, what do we make? And how do we decide what to make? If it's like my decision versus somebody else's, and like there's always this like back and forth between the performance team and the creative team, where the performance team is very numbers driven, very analytical, and the creative team is very visual and doesn't like numbers very much. But you're at a point where, because the volume of creative is so high, the best teams realize that unless data is a core part of your creative process, like you're not going to produce the right things. Because you think about how much content people are creating, there's like a trail of data that gets left behind on performance of that content. And if you're not looking at that, if you're not trying to understand which videos were doing well, which images were doing well, what themes can I pull out from all of those, then you're basically just like shooting in the dark, and there's a lot of inefficiency there. So this was a really big problem for people, and they wanted to be more data driven in their creative process. So a lot of teams, we noticed that they would put together these like elaborate spreadsheets and pull data together and create pivot tables, try to like slice and dice the data. And then they would take this spreadsheet over to the creative team, and the creative team would look at it and be like, this is too bright. Like I can't look at this. There's too many numbers. And like, imagine trying to do creative analysis on a spreadsheet. Like you can't play a video in a spreadsheet, right? It's just not the right place to do creative analysis. And so like, it was just this obvious, like, wait, why is this not solved yet moment, where obviously there needs to be something to help teams learn what's working, like a creative analytics solution to help people understand what's working and what's not, and guide that creative strategy in a way that's rooted in data, but also in a way that is consumable by the creative team. And so pretty quickly, we realized that we want to solve this problem. And there's like this giant workflow issue between just in the creative process, from like analyzing the data to figure out what works, presenting that data to members of the creative team, coming up with a creative brief, sending that creative brief, building out your creative sprint cycle to say, what are the concepts we want to test in the coming weeks, getting approval on that, getting feedback on it. Like there's just this huge problem around the workflow of the creative process that got us very excited to say, okay, we think there's a small place that we can start taking a crack at this problem, but this actually leads into a really large problem for teams the more we can help with the rest of the workflow. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up launching the first version of Motion, which was a product to help teams do exactly that, learn what creatives are working and visualize those in a way that are easy to digest for the creative team, and then share that with commentary on, hey, here's what's working and here's what's not. And that's been doing really well. And some of the best like brands and agencies in the space are now using the product, and it's growing really fast. And yeah, super excited about where the product is today and how much more potential there is in terms of just roadmap for us to keep building. And that gets very exciting, where what you're doing today is working. Mm-hmm. And like you can look years ahead on how much more roadmap there is there without this like constant fear of, is there a market here or not? Like, you know, there is, and you just kind of have to build now for the next few years. And that's where I feel like we are with Motion, and very excited about that, and a lot of work to do ahead. Yeah, that's where we're at.
That's amazing. Honestly, no. And you really took it from like took a pure customer discovery approach. You said, mm-hmm. I don't have a problem in mind. I don't have that I'm trying to solve. I don't have a product I want to build, and I'm just validating it. Like, what are the problems out there? Finding the problem and then building a solution for that. Like, that's pure customer discovery. I love it.
Yeah. Like the thing was like, it seems kind of obvious, but like, there's this like typical idea that, you know, the founder or someone who has like a great idea, like, oh, what if this happens? But mm-hmm. like, especially in B2B, I think if you're building like a consumer product or something like that, like maybe it's not necessarily like people that are having a really urgent problem, but like I knew I wanted to solve something for business owners. Mm-hmm. And for business owners, the problems are very real, and they know what they are, and you just have to ask them about it. Like, what you go to a business owner, you ask like some person in a role, like, what are your problems? What are your top priorities? And they'll tell you about them. And so to me, it was like, you know, this like obvious way that if we want to solve something that's high priority for people, there's no reason to guess. Just need to understand like what is top priority for you right now, and what's bad about it. And the thing is, like, luck is a factor for sure, because it's not every day that you'll go and talk to people and they're all saying the same thing and they all have this mm-hmm. like unsolved problem. So I think we were fortunate in that sense, where like literally every team we talked to was talking about the same thing. And so that made it like very obvious for us. But I imagine like doing that in a different market or at a different time might not lead to as like great of a response, but it really helps to pick an audience too, right? Like, because we knew who we wanted to talk to. So maybe we didn't have an idea, but we had clarity on the market that we wanted to go after. And so all the people we talked to were like in the same kind of role. And so I think that's important to like narrow down, but to just go out blasting and like talk to one person in this role and in that industry, and like, that's going to get you super confused. So having an idea of like at least which market you want to go and talk to is useful, and having like the network to be able to do that is also super useful to be, because like people are busy and don't always have time to kind of talk to you necessarily. So there's a lot of things that were on our side there to be able to do that, and I think we got a bit lucky on timing, but went in there with just the expectation to learn and understand more than anything. Like that was something that was really important to me. I'm not trying to sell you on anything yet. I'm trying to understand you first. And then from that, be like, okay, sounds like you have this problem. If I were to solve it, how do you feel about that? Like, I would love for you to solve this problem, please. Say, okay, wait right there. And then it's like from there, even from there, it's not a good idea to jump into like going to build a product. What we did was just come up with like wireframes that was just sketched on like kind of lower fidelity wireframes. And we went back to these same people and showed it to them. And one of our investors from Shoelace is a guy named Des Traynor, one of the co-founders of Intercom. And he told me once something which I'll never forget about this process. He's like, when you go and show these potential customers a wireframe of what you're building, if they're not jumping out of the seat onto the screen and being like, I want that product right now, like, you have to keep going. Like, you're not there yet. That's the level of excitement that you want to see from the people that you're talking to. And so it was like, we tried to go step by step on, because like the engineering cycle is brutal, right? Imagine you talk to people about their problem and then you go and try to build a product. That's like 4 months is going to be gone. Like, when you could just show them some wireframes and be like, what do you think? And I think the reason why Des said they need to be jumping out of their chair is that people are generally very polite and they don't want to let you down. So again, on a feedback call, oh yeah, that sounds cool. Like, I think I might use this. Like, looks pretty interesting. Yeah, not bad. Like, you know that's not it. Like, you want to see their eyes light up, and you want to see that like they're very excited about this and they like really want this solved. And then you know that, okay, now we take these wireframes and turn it into a product. And if not, we missed something somewhere, so we can go back and see where we went wrong before going deeper into building things that become hard to undo.
Yeah, fair enough. Reza, thank you for sharing all of that. There are a ton of golden nuggets in this conversation. So thank you for honesty. And Reza, as we wrap up, if our listeners wanted to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. Every now and then I'll get like active and then disappear when I'm busy. But my handle is at Reza Khadjavi on Twitter. Feel free to shoot me an email. I'm at reza@motionapp.com. And you can obviously check out Motion at motionapp.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Reza, for coming on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Shaheem.